Hey everyone, it's Heather O'Hara and Melissa Maltais coming back to you again with another webinar in our series since we started in July or August, I believe. And today's webinar is called Your Budget Tells Your Farmers Market Story. So just as by way of introduction, my name is Heather O'Hara and I'm the BC Association of Farmers Markets Executive Director. And our special guest here today is Melissa Maltais, who is the Executive Director of the Fraser North Farmers Market Society, one of our great farmers markets located in the Lower Mainland here in British Columbia. So I'm going to turn it over to Melissa, but before I do, I just wanted to say her and I are both really excited about budgets and numbers. So you've come to the right place if you want to hear about budgets and numbers from people who like that kind of stuff. So anyways, thank you, Melissa, for doing this with us today.
My pleasure. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you again. We're very excited to be hosting this Budget Talks webinar. It is the best time of year because not only is it the lead up to Christmas, but it's also budget planning season. And I'm going to tell you today why it's the best time of year for this. So what we want to be doing is crafting your farmers market financial tale. Your budget is going to be the story that ties everything together for your year. So for next year, it would be 2021, of course. So how is that going to happen? How are we going to help you with making this work? So your budget should reflect the true cost of your operations. So here's where you sit down and you look through your numbers for 2020. And of course, this is a bit of an abnormal year, but you can also go back to 2019 and start really crafting that story for your revenue numbers and your income and your expenses and seeing how that related to your mission. What's really important about this template, this budget that you're going to be working on, is that it's a living document. It's not something that you just want to create, put in a cloud storage or share it with your board and say, okay, it's done. We did budgets, we're good. It's something that you need to revisit and look and sometimes redraft or revise throughout the year because it develops as you do and it shows what your true reflection of your operating costs and income are going to be. And it should really be a reflection of your vision and your goals throughout the year. What are your goals next year? Are they to increase your vendor stall numbers? Are they to get more membership? Are you hoping to get some more programming? Are you hoping to get a better presence online? This is all part of your story, your marketing, your research, and how you want to reach your customers, how you want to serve your members and your vendors. Make sure that when you're crafting your budget, this is what you're keeping at top of mind when you're going through each category and you're figuring out what numbers to put in there. So our first important task is to determine whether you are financially viable, because that's kind of the most important part. If your numbers don't work and your society is going to be in the red for the year, obviously something's got to give and you need to relook at what you're putting out there. And so it's good on one end to make a little bit of assumptions as to what your revenue and your income numbers are going to be. But at the same time, you really want to work with your numbers from the year before. Again, 2020, complete anomaly, but 2019, what did that look like? Take your 2020 numbers, what did that look like? And see if there's something that you can merge in there to make a feasible revenue number for the upcoming year. It's also really important to get quotes. Let's say you're hiring an accountant or a bookkeeper. Try to get 2 or 3 quotes from different sources so that when you're putting that in the budget, you're not just guessing a random number of $2,500 or $4,000. This is actual costs and what you're going to be looking at for the following year. So it's very important to be detail specific. And if you've got very few categories, now is the time as we go through this process for you to start thinking about, well, yeah, we had to pay for this business license last year, or we've had to pay WCB, but we've always just put it into the wages of our staff and we've never really broken it out. This is a time for you and your board to sit down and really reflect on what aspects of your society you spent money on throughout the year and write it all down. The more you write down, the more your budget is going to reflect these core activities and the less surprises you're going to be hit with from year to year. Nobody likes surprises, honestly. And when you're doing your human resources expense, you really want to break that down too. We're going to show you a little bit later on what that looks like. But if you've got paid employees as opposed to contract staff, you want to get that vacation pay and those mercs and benefits broken down so that you're seeing what that true reflection cost is. It's not enough to say, oh, we're paying $20 an hour for our market manager. It's like if you're running that through a payroll system, there are numerous costs involved to having an employee, and that can run you in overage of several $1,000s. So you want to make sure that you're really getting those costs and breaking it down. Be cautious of including new revenue numbers that you haven't proven or confirmed. So if you have a new initiative or a new fundraiser that you want to put on, let's say you're doing an online fundraiser, a silent auction, and you've never done it before, you're not sure of how it's going to go, don't just throw out a random number in there to make your income numbers look better, because it's not going to work. Be very cautious and be conservative and try to do it more on the lower end so that it's a better reflection, and that if you make more, it's always better if you actually hit those targets and go over them rather than come under. You'll feel so much better when that happens.
Hey, Melissa, can I just pipe in there a little bit?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so this financial viability is especially, it's important for any organization, whether it be a business or a nonprofit organization. So we would encourage you to think of this budget process as not only just budgeting for what is to come in your year that you're budgeting for example, so 2021's budget, but also you can use it on the side as well as a bit of a tool to say, here's all the true costs of operating this market, and what would it take from a revenue standpoint to break even or create some kind of surplus that you can reinvest in your farmers market. So it can be used as a bit of a forecasting and an aspirational tool to really understand, like, year one of your farmers market might be different than year 5 of your farmers market, when you've got more sponsorship opportunities, more revenue, you have more people to pay for, etc. So it can be used as a tool to understand and forecast like your vision or what's possible, even though it might not be happening today, and a bit of a reminder about the things and ways you can actually start to create a stronger budget as well. So anyways, thanks, Melissa.
No problem. Now, I feel like there are 2 different options here for creating your budget. It's usually done either by your board treasurer, or it can be done by staff as well. I really encourage markets who have not empowered their staff yet to work on the budget with them, that this is a really key component of creating this vision and this true story budget moving forward, is to get your staff involved, because they are generally on the ground. They know what the expenses are, and they're also the driving force for the board's vision and goals. So they'll sit there and they will know, okay, well, if we want to move ahead with this program or this music, it's going to cost X amount of dollars. And so they will be able to provide you those categories and breakdown probably a little bit better than the overall board together. So I encourage you highly, if your staff isn't already developing the budget for you, that you get them involved and that you put that together. So if you are staff and you are putting the budget together, there's usually a presentation that you're going to need to do, and that's either to your finance committee or to your board as a whole. Now, when you have this budget drafted out the way that we've created the template for you, it really opens up this opportunity for an honest conversation about where those expenses are going, where that income and revenue is coming from, because it doesn't leave anything for questions in terms of like, well, how is this feasible and how are you doing this? The more you can break it down, the more transparency you see, and the easier it is for the finance committee and the board to understand that overall story of what the budget is going to look like, as well as be able to approve it moving forward. So sometimes budget is hard because you've got your staff on one end saying we really need these things, and you've got the board on the other side trying to be fiscally responsible for your society or your organization. And that is totally okay, because the two of you have to balance out and move forward in harmony. It can be tough, and it can be heated, but honestly, the more conversation that you have surrounding these is much better, because it shows that everyone is engaged and super interested in the story of your market. So the details will allow you again to further explain what's going on in the market, what you have, and if you're able to tie it back into those visions and goals, it's so much easier for everyone to approve them, because it just makes sense, because you are now delivering your organization's mission via this budget. Heather, did you have anything to add to that?
I liked what you said about the harmony and empowering staff to do this work. I mean, a couple of things that strike me there with that comment. One is a question around your organization. Is your board a governance board at this juncture in your history, or is it a operations board? So that might determine how involved the board is with creating the budget versus just reviewing and approving the budget. So a lot of cases, a lot of boards with farmers markets are still operations focused boards, because they don't have a lot of staff, for example.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a distinction there. Number two would be having trust and faith in that market manager who really understands life on the ground, and probably has come to you with some enthusiasm and energy to really do interesting things and be a champion for your market in terms of drumming up revenue sources and all that kind of stuff. So I think that was very, very, very good input, Melissa.
Thanks, Heather. And I think, just reiterating on what you've just commented on, I can't tell you as an executive director, and also in the past being an operations manager, how empowering it is to be handed this responsibility by my board. It is, I understand that there's trust involved, and that they are tasking me with something incredibly important that means a lot to the future of our organization. And it's not like I get to approve it and said, this is what the budget is. They're tasking me with that. We know that you will have those numbers, and we trust that that will work for us moving forward, and then they'll be able to approve it. So if you have staff that aren't involved yet, honestly, it's no better way to make somebody feel valued than being able to have that input in your society story.
And just to add to that too, like, it becomes a management tool throughout the year, right? So in other words, a board of directors approves a budget, whether or not they created the budget or not, they're ultimately approving it. And it gives the staff member, executive director, market manager, etc., the tool about which to figure out, like, they've been approved to do certain things within a certain amount of dollars, and it gives them the freedom to do that without coming to the board with every request to spend money, or with every request or information around what is this revenue source coming to us. So anything that falls outside of what was not approved, of course, is something that the board should be aware of and be monitoring throughout the year. But ultimately, it's a management tool, and a good organization's process would be to show on a regular basis your year-to-date actuals against your budget that was approved by the board. Okay, and then that tells the story: are you on budget? Are you above budget? Have you spent too much money? Are you under budget? And then the staff and the board should have the conversation, like, do we understand why there's a variance here? Yes or no? And are we okay with that? Yes or no? And then carry on.
Yeah, I agree. Awesome. Now, something that Heather and I are really excited about is to talk to you about not being afraid of our surplus. But Melissa, we're a nonprofit. I understand that. You understand that. But we also need to be able to invest in our organizations. And whether that means getting a new vehicle that will help you cart tents around, or maybe the city that you work with, they're having some ideas about putting in a structure for you, but you need to have matching funds. There is always a reason to put a bit of that profit you made for that year, that surplus, into some sort of fund that you can invest in your market for previous years. There's many things that you can do with that surplus. So you can have the capital to invest in equipment, like we mentioned, like cargo van or infrastructure, and then these will help your market in the future grow and succeed. All of these investments are laying this journey and pathway for you to do even better the following year. It's also a great idea to put money away for things like COVID. I mean, who knew we would be in this pandemic this year? Like, this is crazy. If you have a little bit of surplus aside, then you know that you're going to be okay from month to month. So maybe this year has been a real reality check for some of us who didn't have a little bit of a savings. And now we're thinking in future years, yes, you know what, we're going to put $500 away, $1,000 away, whatever we're making extra, we're going to save that for the rainy day. But it also can be used for new activities. I mean, a lot of our markets started online farmers markets this year. That's amazing. So we want to do some extra marketing involved with that. Put out Facebook ads, maybe start a newsletter template on MailChimp, which costs money. So just adding new technology, doing some rebranding, there's always ways for us to grow and move forward and change to really capture the consumer market that we have out there, because people's shopping habits are changing. And so our budget needs to be able to save for that, so that the following year, if you are like, you know what, we could really use this kind of platform to help us reach these people, then we have this money set aside for exactly this kind of investment into the market.
So, maybe here's a real world story from BCFM. So we, a number of years ago, invested some of our surplus in our rebranding. Okay, so that was like we had a brand that had been with us for 20 years. It was good, but it needed to be modernized, and it also needed to be more practical. We weren't able to use a logo because of its limitations. How it was constructed, it was clip art basically. So that was a big investment, but we used surplus to do that because we knew we would see a return on that as an organization. It elevated the organization, it's easier to use and affiliate our membership with, and all kinds of reasons. We also invested in some of the website development. So that rebranding also included our revamping our bcfarmersmarket.org website as well. So these are really practical things that matter for an organization. Another comment around the working capital fund. A good best practice, whether you're a nonprofit or a business, is to have a 6-month working capital fund. So what that means is, could you cover the costs of your organization, core activities like rent, keep the lights on, pay your core staff for up to 6 months? That's something to work towards, perhaps incrementally. Not everybody has a lot of net surplus all the time, but to chip away at it and look at that 6-month runway for a rainy day fund / working capital fund. I think just to reassure you that nonprofits can have a surplus, and that's a good practice.
Awesome. Oops. Okay, here we go. So we're going to give you a little bit of a snapshot before we head into the budget template. So this is what your income summary report would look like. It's and one of the tabs in the template that we have here. And what we do is we list all the different types of incomes, and these are the actual headers. So we've got vendor, membership, government, sponsorship, grants, fundraising, and other. You always want to have that other in there because sometimes you get some random money, which is always good. Who doesn't love random money? But you'll need to put it in somewhere in your budget, and you really want to account for that because maybe next year you'll get it again. So then it will become a header in your next budget. Not a header.
Melissa, can I just add to? So we were very intentional here to have different kinds of income listed. Okay, it's like some folks may have a budget that just says income and one
Yes.
giant bucket of money, okay, which is fine. But what's not fine about it is it's really important to understand the where money comes from story. This is also, again, part of the story of your market, right? Like, these are all the ways we pay for this market. Here's all the different sources and places where the money comes from to tell the story of your market. And what this shows the reader is, okay, the bulk of their market is supported by vendors. Okay, that tells a really big story. Government income, some money in this case, great. For a lot of markets, that might be a $0. So that to me is a bit of a flag to go, it's $0. What as a market can we do to convince our local governments to support our market with cash, for example? If it's $0, that's not a bad thing. It says, red flag, red flag. Is there an opportunity to go find some income from that source? Okay, so it's quite intentional that we are choosing these categories because they make sense for a farmer's market, but it also flags you as an organization to go, have we got money coming in from all these sources that we could? And if the answer is no, then it's a great catalyst to start seeking out some of those sources you may not otherwise when it's there in front of you.
It definitely, it's all about having those conversations. So you're seeing the gaps and the holes in the budget, and you're thinking, maybe I can go and ask for money. I mean, it's hard to ask for money, I'm not going to lie, but once you get used to it, then it's not as hard, and it's a pretty organic conversation that you can have with your municipalities or, fundraisers or sponsors. Now for the expenses summary. So now these are very broad headers at this point. We'll go into a little bit of the breakdown for you just to show you. But we just wanted to show how like the admin and operating costs are going to make the majority of your expenses here. And then the rest of them are more for your storytelling. So, you'll have markets, programs, and activities, your marketing and promotions, and how it all draws back into these parts of your market that need to move you forward in your year to year. So now we do have that there's a surplus here. And what we've done is we've actually put it into a capital working fund. So, we've made an extra $700 for this year. Great. We're going to invest that back into our market for a following year. It's great to actually set up a term investment account if you're with a credit union or your bank, just so that you have some place to put some money away and it actually earns a little bit of interest for you in the year. Heather, did you want to make any comments?
Yeah, I think just this also, like Melissa said, tells the story of your market and shows people, or gives people a bit of a reality check to say, this is what it takes to run that market. And admin and operating being a big number is not a bad thing, because it actually grounds people and the reader to say, there's a lot of people power that goes into running this market, and that's where it shows up. So, and it also says if you're able to pay staff as opposed to recruiting volunteers, that is wages in pockets in your community. Okay, so that's not a bad thing. That means that somebody is making a living, generating their personal income from working at your market. And in addition to all the other amazing things that a farmer's market does for its community, making local food available, having this great place, an incubator for small businesses, it's a tourism destination and a community gathering space. It's also an employer, and it's also generating wages and a living for a lot of people. So that's another big contribution, and that story is right there in front of us here.
Absolutely. So now for the extra fun part, we're going to take a look at the budget template. Okay, maybe I can make this a little bit bigger here. Okay. Oops. So this is something that Heather and I have developed for you. So we've called it a BC Farmers Market Budget Template Sample. So all of these numbers are just random numbers that we've put in for you. And then you can go in, all the formulas are there, and you can change it up as you feel. So we're just going to go over, not necessarily in full detail, but just give you an overview of what these different headers are all about. So vendor income, obviously you've got stall fees, but we really wanted you to notice that there's also online fees there as well. So we did a webinar about that, about sustaining your online farmers market. And there was a piece in there about charging vendors, figuring out a percentage, or doing a flat fee. And so this is where that new revenue stream might come in. And again, we talked about being careful with that. So it's just about maybe surveying your vendors, finding out who's going to be willing to pay, who's not, and then just understanding what that monthly number would mean to you. It might be zero right now, or it might be $1,000, but whatever it is, it's great to include it in your budget moving forward if that's the model that you're choosing with. We also have, for our society, we do have a vendor membership fee as well as like a friends membership fee. So vendors are generally $25 and friends of the market are $10. I feel like a lot of you have this kind of system, so it's good to break it down and not just have it as one line membership, because you really want to see where you can push it. For our society, adding a membership fee as something that you can purchase online has doubled our membership sales for the year. We've just had people that add it to their shopping cart when they shop. It's been great. So we have our own portion of the store online farmers market. The government income. This is where you can mark down things that aren't in kind. So we love working with the cities. We love working with our municipalities. A lot of the times they'll gift you in-kind donations of people or equipment or the location itself, which is really great and it's awesome. But a lot of the municipalities also have it in their budget to help you with some of the operating costs, because like Heather said, she listed all of these things that we do for our communities: economic development, tourism. Like, we fit in so many brackets. There is a whole other webinar we've done about that. So if you want municipal agreements and how you can get one, you can visit that webinar. But this is where you would put that in. You would also put the Canada Summer Jobs Grant. So if you haven't been applying for that, I suggest that you do, because then you're able to, like Heather said, put wages back into your community. And that's operated through your member of parliament in your city, so they often will approve you for some funding for that. Now, sponsorship income. This one's pretty general. Like, you can put it as just one line for budget, but I strongly suggest that you break it down into what types of sponsorship, what things can you monetize at your market that makes sense for you. So can you do a day of sponsorship for the market where there's signage and you're doing social media posts and all of that for that one sponsor? Do you have a weekly newsletter that you send out to 500 people, 1,000 people? You can sell a portion of that for an ad. Your music tent, your stage, you know, that's also an opportunity. So all of these things should be broken down. Anything that you do and that you sell for your market as a sponsorship opportunity needs to be broken down. And there's no reason why you shouldn't be selling the chef demo for a certain amount of money, which covers the cost of the chef. That shouldn't be coming out of your operations cost. You should be able to get sponsorship for this kind of stuff. For grant and honorariums, a lot of the times credit unions will have a nice community branch pot that you can go and apply for $500 here, $1,000 there, depending on how your vision matches, and it's usually pretty good. There's also community foundation grants that you can apply for. Work BC has some awesome programs for staff training where they will pay for your staff to do conflict resolution. Those are wonderful. And of course, the BC AFM Farmers Market Nutrition Coupon Honorarium. So you really need to break those down and see where those are coming from, because these are also reminders for your market manager and your staff to go, oh yeah, I need to go and apply for that grant. I haven't done that yet. It's on my list. I need to go make that call or write that application so that we're bringing that income in. There's also different kinds of fundraising income too. Again, because this year has been a bit of an anomaly, we haven't been able to do as many things as we love to do. But here, I mean, we all have different types of fundraisers we do. Some of you guys do recipe books, you know, the basket raffle is always a good one. So there's just whatever you do, I highly suggest you just write it down and you put it in, and you put whatever your previous year or the year before that your revenue was, or your income, so that you have something moving forward that, okay, that's the target that we want to reach. We need to sell this much to get to that, or you need to surpass it, which is always great. Other income, again, sometimes you might have something that's a little bit random, a little bit different, so it's great to include in this one. Heather, did you have anything that you wanted to point out?
Yeah, just to sort of bring it back to that telling the story theme of this webinar. So, you know, your market already has a bit of a rhythm, right? It's kind of got its own little life of its own, and you know, generally speaking, here's all the things that you're doing and all the income sources you have. So again, rather, like we said, rather than having big buckets, just one giant income bucket, this has got all those sources, and within that, all those places, individual specific places or things where that money's coming from. So you know, if you design your books well, QuickBooks or whatever, or you're using spreadsheets only, that's fine too. Although I would encourage you to get like a really basic accounting program software. Some of it's free out there, not QuickBooks, but waveapps.com is a Canadian software program that you might want to use, for example. But what it does, if it's constructed well, then you can roll up these detailed snapshots into these bigger headers. So if you recall, the last slide had like maybe 6 income sources: sponsorship, vendors, grants. This is kind of like an expanded view. So there's the rolled up ones. And here's all the expanded, if you just go over there a little bit. Yeah, here's all the, oh, and that's a rolled up one there. Never mind. There we go. So there's the expanded version, right? So you bust out your profit and loss income statement, and you've got all the detail. And then you can roll it up for, you know, somebody who wants to just see a rolled up version, for example. But for the market manager, and I think the board treasurer, people who are really into the nitty gritty of the market, this level of detail tells a better story than just one giant bucket with some people don't do very good memos and you don't have any clue where the money is coming from or what it's to be used for. So this is a very, very strong financial management practice that you see here as well.
Great. Now getting on to the expenses. It's always fun. So one of your biggest expenses will likely be your human resources. And I can't stress enough how important it is to invest in the people. I'm a little bit biased here as I am one of those people, but your strongest assets are, especially during COVID and these kinds of things, are the people who are on the ground and who are running these things. They're the faces of your market. They're the people who are handling vendors. They are the people who are talking to customers, and it's super important that we acknowledge them. So for the admin and operating expenses, for the human resources side specifically, we've actually gone ahead and broken it down for you. So what we have here is we have a little breakdown, and it all depends on what positions you actually have at your market. Some of you may not have all these staff, that's fine. Some of you may have more, that's also great. So you just want to sit down with it and really see, like, okay, what's the salary for the year? What's the vacation pay on top of that? Your CPP, your employer CPP contribution, and your employer EI contribution. So if you say, okay, your salary is $25,000 for the year, your salary is actually going to be $27,756. So that's something you really need to think about, that you're not necessarily just paying that hourly wage or that salary, you're paying on top of that, especially if you're doing a payroll system, not a contractor. So it's great.
Melissa, oh, sorry, just to interject there. The way to think about that is the cost for you as an employer. So the difference between an employee's base salary, they know they're making 25,000 bucks. This extra mercs, benefits, CRA deductions would be considered the employer costs on top of base salary. So just to give you a little context.
For sure. And then you've got, you know, the breakdown for the other staff that may be hourly instead of salary paid. So you tell us how many hours, you work it out for the year, their hourly wage, and then again, you go through with the mercs and the benefits too. So we've also included volunteers in here because some organizations pay an honorarium for volunteers if they come to do setup. Sometimes it's really hard to get people out at 7 o'clock in the morning to set up your market. So you might want to throw them, $15 an hour for 4 hours for setup and takedown, and that's great. So let's say you pay 2 of them $60 each for the day. The total honorarium is $120. So you just want to make sure that you've also got that in your budget, so you're not just throwing money out into the ether and not knowing where it's coming from. So I highly suggest that you also do a paper trail for this kind of stuff and that you don't just pay out cash. We do things right now by EFTs, which is great because it really makes us accountable for where the money goes. So that's also the breakdown for you. And then you'll have this as part of the template so that you can play around with it and see what you can do. So part of your staffing costs will also be WCB. So you always need to pay workers' compensation. That's really important in case somebody gets injured. I can't tell you how much risk management is important. So you always want to make sure that that's covered. Also, volunteer staff appreciation. Sometimes we do staff meals at the market if we're in a location where there isn't really a restaurant available, or because of COVID, we didn't really have food trucks. So sometimes it's just nice to give your staff a meal. So it's just like little things, or coffee if it's a cold, rainy day, or, like I love to treat my staff to things because it just makes me want them to know that I appreciate them, especially if they're going above and beyond the work. So please put that in your budget if you don't already have that. And you should also be recognizing with your volunteers, which I'm sure all of you do because they're so incredibly important, especially right now during a pandemic. We broke out the insurance for 2 different kinds because there's general liability, but you also have the board of directors insurance. So we broke that down into 2. Some of us have vehicles. There's a lot of costs involved with maintaining a vehicle, so we've got that as well. Professional services, you could have accountant, which reviews your books, and then your bookkeeper, which helps with your books throughout the year. You may also need to consult a lawyer for some reason, so it's always good to have these kinds of things, and then a placeholder for other in case you have to hire somebody else. And then with logistics, we've got equipment repairs. Your supplies are probably going to be a big cost, as well as now moving forward, you've got to start thinking about your tech costs too. Like, are your employees using their own cell phones to make the majority of these vendor calls? You should try to be accommodating to that and give them $10 a month if you can, or find a way to compensate them for that. There's also Zoom, which we might all be on. It costs $20 a month. You need to put that in there. A newsletter platform, MailChimp. You could even break down your tech costs. Like, we're talking about doing subcategories to do whichever one, what you're going to have throughout the year. So that's also a really good way to break it down and say, oh, you know what? We've got Zoom, we've got MailChimp, we've got, QuickBooks, we've got all of these things. Like, that would be accounting software. So different things, break it down even further if you can. For our organization, we have credit card processing fees because we have an online farmers market that's run through different platforms. So we take care of those costs. So that can run up a hefty bill, and you have to make sure that you account for that as part of your revenue for those online farmers markets. Membership licenses and fees, of course, we have our BC-AFM membership. I would strongly suggest, if you haven't done so already, to join your Chamber of Commerce because they have some wonderful opportunities for nonprofits and businesses to connect. So you can be featured in their newsletters, you can do their online networking, attend their AGM. It's a really good connection for you. And for $200, $300 a year, I feel like it's a really good investment. And that's more of your storytelling because you're going to be working with the Chamber of Commerce. And you're going to tell them your story. They're going to share it with other people. And then that directly ties in to your market day sponsorships, okay? That's where you're meeting business people that are like, hey, I would love to be visible for the day in a farmer's market. Oh, I would love that opportunity to sponsor. And so you're telling that story through this like Chamber of Commerce membership because you're explaining to your board, like, yeah, this directly goes back to fundraising and sponsorships. And you should also try to include some sort of professional development. Again, I talked about Work BC is a great one for a grant. put in some staff training in there. We've got the BCAFM conference that we all like to go to each year. And there also should be board member education. Vantage Point puts on some really good ones. Sometimes your city hall or municipality will have some board governance things too. It's great because your board is all usually volunteer as well. It's a great way to recognize their work and to help them learn more skills in terms of governance or what they can do to further your story about your society or your organization. And then the part we all love, market programs and activities. How important is that in the scape of your market? Again, this year, kind of an anomaly, but you want to reflect that. So there's music, kids activities, chef demos, workshops. There's all of these things that you tie into the community event space aspect of your story that you need to account for. Are there any other activities that you're doing at the market that you want to put in? Great, add it in. Do you have like grandmothers doing a demo or like doing sampling? Like things like that are really important to go in there so that you can explain it and tell the story. Marketing and promotions, there's all of these different aspects that fall into this. So of course you've got your website, something that you host all your information, print advertising. We do mostly Edible Magazine here in the Lower Mainland. They're super wonderful. Some people do the newspaper, local magazine. It's important to differentiate between print and digital because you want to see where that money is going to, and you also want to start tracking, this is completely different, but your return on investment for those. So local magazine, did you do something with them that said, you know, mention this ad at the market? So like, was that investment, did that really tell the story of what you're trying to do? Or did you get more engagement in your social media ads where you had people do a contest and they shared and a lot of commented, and some people, you know, mentioned that at the market. So it's a great way to see where you're spending your money, where you're getting that reach, and how customers are finding out about you. We also like to do some customer engagement. So promotions and contests, people love this stuff, so it's always a great way to spend some money. So we do a monthly contest through our email newsletter for members. So last month we did like a curated box that members could get. So make sure you put that in because it's so easy to lose track if you give out $50 worth of market money. Like that can just get lost, and that is an expense because you're going to end up paying your vendors for that $50 that they're going to be spending at market. So make sure you budget for it and it doesn't get lost in the system. Market merchandise, if you want to make hats or sweaters or t-shirts that you're going to sell at the market, that's also good to budget for. And then there's the contingency, which the treasurers always love to have, and I'm always struggling with because I'm like, what do I have left over to put in the contingency? So again, that's a lot of your rainy day fund. That's if like, oh no, our ads for the print newspaper ended up being $800 instead of $700. That's kind of where that contingency fills in. So it kind of breaks that gap where like, you know, I over budgeted something and it didn't turn out so well. So now we have to pay that extra money. Well, that's okay because we do have a little bit of that padding, that contingency. So treasurers always love to see that. So make sure that you put that in there. And again, we put our little net income loss, which is our income here, and then we contributed that and we invested it into our farmers market for the following year. Over to you, Heather.
Or for like, not for necessarily investing for the following year, but it could be, or it could be just that rainy day fund in case something like COVID happens and you have to operate without any expected revenue or something, right? So
yeah.
Kind of that rainy day fund, or to invest in whatever other things you want to invest in potentially.
Definitely. Did you want to add anything else to expenses, Heather?
Nope. Just
yeah,
maybe sort of just one comment around, again, just to encouraging people to think of true costs. So for example, if you get some of these things on this list in kind, that's good, okay, in some cases. Like maybe you've got a bookkeeper in the community who wants to give you free bookkeeping services. Great. Excellent. But what if you didn't have that? So the fact that you have a place to put an expense for bookkeeping or be aware of that is important, because if that person didn't exist and do it for free, then you would have to pay for that. So that would be the cost of your organization's budget, and it would be a true cost picture. Then assuming it's going to all be paid for or somebody's going to donate that. So again, really stressing the true cost picture. So these should be these true expenses. And if you do have in kind, don't forget that if that went away, you might have to pay for it one day, and you should know what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this kind of budget, the one with it expanded, is great for all of the folks in your organization that love the details. But as we mentioned earlier, you do have the option of just doing the headers, the summary, and all of these numbers are linked with a formula to go back to your expanded budget. So you have either or option that you can send to your board or your stakeholders so that they can see that. I believe that is our budget talk.
Yeah, that's great. I think just so everybody's aware that this template, that spreadsheet, and this the PowerPoint that goes with this recorded webinar and the webinar will be made available on the BCFM website after this is completed. So if you wanted to use that spreadsheet and kind of start to MacGyver it and make it into your own, or use it as is if it makes sense to, you're welcome to do that. It'll be on the BCFM, bcfarmersmarket.org website under our tools and resources area. So, so yeah, please do. We do encourage you to use that if it's useful to you. So Melissa, have you got anything else you want to add, or things that we might have not have covered here?
I think we covered quite a bit. Honestly, my biggest advice to people is to get your staff involved, work on it together, and don't be afraid to have hard and sometimes heated conversations about some items, because we're all passionate about what we do. We all love serving our community and our vendors, and you need to have different people involved in budget making. It can't just be one person and another person. It's definitely a story, and you need different point of views.
Yeah, very good. I also think it's a good tool for the funders, the supporters who support you, so that between governments, your local funders, your community sponsors, for them to understand what it takes to pull off and run a farmer's market well. And it's also a very good tool for your vendors who may or may not understand, like perhaps maybe they're not happy with how much money they have to pay for booth fees, but then you get to show your vendors that this is the cost of putting on this awesome market for you to sell at, and there's a cost associated with doing that, so that it's a bit of a story to tell for other people as well besides your own organization, right? And the value of that, the importance of that, because it adds up very quickly when you have $50 here over multiple things. Costs add up fast, and so does revenue if it's handled well as well. So it just grounds, I think, everybody in the organization, outside of the organization, like what does it take to pull off and create this really awesome farmers market that we have and we love so much, and there's a cost to do so, and then gives people the ability to understand their role in it, and perhaps a catalyst to inspire them to invest even more in it if they love it that much. Okay, so Melissa, your screen is frozen, but I think I can still hear you just fine.
Yeah,
right.
It's just, yeah.
Excellent. So I think I think we've covered all the ground that we wanted to do. So I'll suggest that we say goodbye.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa, for joining and doing this with us again, okay?
Okay.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.